everyone. I'm a little bit sad because I think this might be one of the last demos that I give you. We are doing lemon buttermilk cake today, and this is going to be your only demo for the cake unit. You are learning today the conventional cake method. So it's a very basic method of putting together your ingredients for a nice light cake. Okay? Lemon is a choice. You don't have to use lemon. You could just make it a vanilla cake. Okay? Buttermilk will make it a more tender cake. I'm not using buttermilk because not a lot of us just happen to have buttermilk at home. Some of you might, I don't. So I'm going to use what's called soured milk. Very similar idea. The acid in the buttermilk or acid in the soured milk will make our cake more tender by softening the gluten in the flour. Okay? All right, let's start. We have our softened unsalted butter or margarine. So I had left this overnight to be nice and soft. So there's 125 there. We have sugar, 210. So you see why cakes are soft and moist, because there's a lot of sugar. We have lemon zest to give it some nice lemon flavor. So again, if you don't want lemon, just omit that. Okay. We have vanilla. If you're going to omit the lemon, add a little more vanilla. Okay. We have 2 eggs. Okay, right there. Sifted flour. Okay, I've sifted already and then measured. I have salt and baking powder all ready for us. Now our liquid is going to be, like I said, the buttermilk or soured milk. So what I've done here is for 125 milliliters of sour milk, I've added 7 milliliters of lemon juice, vinegar, anything that's acidic. I want a large bowl. I'm going to cream our butter. So conventional cake method, you always cream your butter and sugar. Very similar to cookies, remember? Okay, here we go. We're going to add our dry and our liquid alternating. Okay, so what that means is we're going to add dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. Okay, starting with dry and ending with dry. So 3 additions of dry, 2 additions of the liquid. Now I'm going to show you why we need to start with dry and end with dry mixture, because we don't want your batter to look curdled like this. Do you see how it's looking chunky? If I didn't end with dry and if I had left the liquid to put in at the end, your batter would look chunky. The flour helps to combine it all. So we need to make sure we start with flour and we end with flour to help combine the fat and the water. Remember, a lot thicker than maybe if you're used to using a cake mix. This is because we use butter instead of oil. Butter will make a richer, a little bit more dense cake, a little heavier, but very flavorful. If you use oil, you can use oil and it will be a little bit lighter, okay, and a little bit thinner batter. So with this batter, we're going to fill 6 cupcakes and 1 cake tin. You could use a round cake pan like that, or you could use a springform pan like this. Okay, these open up like that and the bottom comes out, so it's much easier to take your cake out. If you're going to do the mousse cake, this really helps. If you want to make one big mousse cake, you need this edge. If you're going to do small little mousse cakes, you could use just your regular round cake pan or a square cake pan, and I'll show you how to cut it into smaller rounds for little individual size mousse cakes. Now, if you're going to use a round cake pan, it really helps to have some parchment on the bottom to be able to get your cake out easily. So if you have parchment or even wax paper, that will work. To grease the outside edge. So we'll use shortening for that. We're going to add a little bit of flour to that. Is it leaves a nice floured edge so that the cake can climb up the side of the pan. So whatever extra flour, you can tap right out. Okay, so have that ready at the beginning. You would do the same thing as this in this one. Okay. If you do half 6 cupcakes and a cake, the cake will only be about that thick, so this one will take about 25 minutes. Okay, so it just depends what you choose. 12 cupcakes, 1 higher cake, or 6 and a low cake. That would be for the mousse. Okay, if you want to make the mousse cake, you would do a shorter cake, okay, and 6 cupcakes. Okay, if you're using the cake pan, okay, you would only use about half the batter. Half of it would go into cupcakes. Okay, and you can scoop that in. And you only want it a thin layer. How the middle of your cake tends to always be rounded. Okay, kind of like that. If you make the middle a little bit dented in, so I make a tiny bit of a crater, push it out of the middle a bit, it will be a slightly flatter cake than rounded. Okay, so a little bit of a crater. Okay, so they're still quite light in color. Let them cool just for a minute in the pan and then take them out to cool on the cooling rack. The cake coming out of the oven. It has been about 20 minutes, so this one also took about the same time because it is very thin. Ways to tell if it's done: you see some golden brown around the edges, a little bit on top. I've checked the widest part with a toothpick. One last check is to push with your finger gently back. Just gently. Let it cool for about a minute in the pan. Then to get it out of the pan, you're going to use a butter knife and run it around the edge in case it's stuck. Okay. on this pan, this one's a springform pan, so you would undo that little latch there and it would open it up. If you don't have a springform pan, you would take a different coon rack. Now notice, this is a very thin cake. Okay, so this is just the bottom layer, this way, bottom layer of the mousse. You're going to put about a layer of mousse on top. So it's almost like just a crust underneath the mousse, okay? All right, while the cakes are cooling, I'm going to show you a few different ways to prep your cake, depending what you're making. So, if you made a dozen cupcakes, I would store them in a Ziploc bag. This is what we would have done in school. If you decided to do cupcakes and mousse cake, then you would have had 6 cupcakes and 2 mousse cakes, possibly even 3 or 4. So for the mousse cakes, you need to have some sort of ring to hold that mousse in while it sets. Okay? So I wanted to try and find something that you might have at home. So I searched everywhere like this. So I have a can of peaches. You can open one end and open the other end, and you would have a tube that is open on both sides. Thought, what else do I have in the house? And I went for a Starbucks with my husband and thought, the top of that Starbucks cup might actually work. And I find cutting down this direction a little easier. So I'm looking into the cup and cutting here. I feel like Mr. Maker. Do you remember that show? I loved that show. So that's how I got these little rings. Don't throw away the bottom yet, because we're going to use that as our tracer to cut the piece of cake out with. Okay, so I'm going to keep that piece. So we're going to cut, so you're going to fit, let's see if we can fit 4 of these in here. So you see, if you use these cups, you can fit 4. You can make 4 little mousse cakes. Okay? If you use something bigger, like this can, you will probably only get 2. Inside. Okay? I'll do the rest of them and then we'll show you what the next step is. Okay, this scraps you have here, you can save for later. You can put this, cut it into cubes and put it into something called a trifle. You can mix it with some whipped cream and berries, and if you cut it into little cubes and soak it with a little bit of syrup, it'll taste really good. So don't throw this cake out, you can just eat it later. Okay? All right, what to do next? We have our 4 pieces of cake cut out. Okay? Now you need something to hold your mousse together on top of your cake. So you need some sort of support before the mousse sets, because the mousse is very wet and liquid. So we have this as our support, but we need to put a liner, like a plastic liner. So I'm thinking of what we have at home. I had this cut up from one of those overhead projector plastic films. You've probably seen them at school. That's why it's all curled up. And I just cut a strip, and I'm going to line the inside of this. Wherever it stops, I'm going to tape it. Okay, so it doesn't come apart. Okay, so you're taping it on the outside, and that's going to hold it together. That's one way. But many of you might not have something like this at home. So again, I thought, what do we have at home that we can use? So I thought, maybe, just maybe, this might work. So we'll get our next one. Maybe a Ziploc bag. We've got a long piece of plastic. This is not going to be as firm, so I'm a bit concerned this might not hold the mousse very well, but we will see how this goes, okay? Next one, see, definitely not as solid as that one. Next one I thought we could try, again, a little bit floppy, is one of these sheet protectors. All right, once you've got those in there, we're gonna pop our cake into the bottom of it. Now, before we do that, I'm going to put it on a tray. I've put them all on a tray because we're going to have to put this into the refrigerator to set. So you want something that's going to be easy to carry them all. Now let's get our mousse ready. I chose to do strawberry mousse because I had frozen strawberries at home. Heavy whipping cream. We're gonna whip this up soon. But we also need a pack of this plain gelatin. Okay, it's called Knox gelatin. Comes in a box like this. And what it is it's basically like Jell-O, but without the flavor. So it is gelatin. It is an animal product. So if you're a strict vegan, you need to make sure you look out for the ingredient gelatin in things. You might want to use agar instead, which is a vegetable type thickener that will thicken liquids. Okay, so for the first step, we're going to take that strawberry puree that I made and warm it up. Okay, so put it into a pot and you're going to warm it up over the stove. We need it warm to be able to dissolve the gelatin. Okay. While that's warming up, we're going to soften our gelatin. So I've got about 30 milliliters of water for a whole pack of gelatin. And what you're going to do is sprinkle that on top of the water. Try to be careful not to get too much on the side of your dish. If you do, make sure you've pushed it down so it hits the water. So you see right now we are hydrating the gelatin and softening it. Okay, so this is called softening the gelatin, getting some water into those dry crystals, and then we'll put that into our warmed sauce to dissolve it. You see how it's a clear sort of structure? It's already gelatinized. We want to dissolve that now with some heat. And you should not see any crystals. Now you see there? There's a big chunk of gelatin that needs to be dissolved still. So I'll put that back in, scrape it back in there. We want to make sure all that gelatin stays in our sauce. So make sure none of it is stuck to your spoon. And make sure none of the gelatin crystals are stuck to the side of the pot. our whipped cream whip up faster and a little lighter and airier if everything is cold. So the cream is cold, the bowl is cold, and we'll get it all nicely whipped up. Now, you have to be careful with whipped cream not to over whip it. Otherwise, you're going to get butter, okay? It's going to get too thick and you'll get past the point of nice thick whipped cream and it will start making butter, okay? Basically, the fat molecules are all joining up and creating little chunks of butter. Those lines are definitely staying now. When I lift some of this up, it will hold its peak. So that's pretty good. You see that? Now, be sure your strawberry puree is cool enough. Because if you put this in too soon and it's still hot, it's going to melt all your cream. All right, so now that it's cool enough, we're going to put the whipped cream into the strawberry mixture. We don't want to put this into here because you'll crush all your beautiful light airy whipped cream. Overnight, and let's see how they turned out. Okay, I'm going to show you the Starbucks cups first. So what you're going to do is just gently lift the cup part off, leaving the plastic on. Can rinse this off and reuse it. So if you want to make mousse cakes again, you can just wash that gently with some soap and water and just put it off to the side somewhere. Not bad. The Ziploc bag worked fairly well too. Okay, it held its shape. So that one worked out nicely as well. Ideally, you want a little more mousse than cake if possible. Okay, and then I want to show you a bit of the disaster one. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see it. So what happened with this one? Oh no, check that out. So all the mousse, when I put it in, the mousse slipped down behind the plastic and started to dribble out. Okay, part of the reason for that was this ring was not strong enough. It was a very soft plastic. So I'm trying to lift that ring up right now. And the other problem I had was when I was putting it in the refrigerator, something fell into my plastic and that loosened the seal of the cake in plastic to keep the mousse from dripping down there. Okay, so I had one disaster. That's okay. I'm willing to sacrifice. It'll still taste good.